Thank you guys for coming. We have Dennis here from X.AI, and we're going to jump right into it. So, we always have to start off with a very simple question. Where are you from?
So where I'm from, I'm obviously not from around here. I think that's easy to figure out. I am, I think, what your candidates called a socialist. So you can run out screaming right now. So I'm Danish. Grew up, took my CS degree back home. Came over in 2008 when we sold our prior company to Yahoo, and actually just turned American 2 months ago.
Congratulations.
We'll see on next Tuesday whether I fucked up and kind of undo the whole thing.
So, not to get a little off topic, but I'm curious now, how was the process of becoming an American?
So here's the thing. I spent more time bitching about it than actually working it. And when I started to work it, it was super easy. I'm going to give you some stats here because you've heard other stats. So I originally came over on what's called an L1 visa. If you're an American, you know nothing. If you're not an American, you become a visa expert. You have a PhD very quickly. And if you're in that pool, you know, right? So you and me know all the visas and all the requirements. And the L1 is one click removed from slavery, which is that you can actually only work for the company which brings you over. It's a manager's visa. And the way we fixed it is that Yahoo hired me into their European division, then moved me over as a manager. But if they terminate you, you have 60 days to leave, which seems a little bit harsh with wife and 2 girls in school and what have you. So I spent so much time bitching, saying it's unfair, I'm going to take all my Yahoo money, start a new firm over here, hire people, do good. And I probably spent 8 months until nobody really wanted to talk to me anymore. And then I finally applied, thinking, okay, now that I'm alone, I'll apply. And from I applied to actually got my green card, 45 days. 45 days. That is awesome. So the whole system actually do work. And applying for my citizenship took 3 months from application to swearing in. Just saying that it does work sometimes if you just spend less time bitching and more time working on it.
That seems to be the...
Sorry, that was an advert for...
seems to be also the way in terms of building a company, just working on actually building it, not bitching about it. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're obviously known for Amy, X.AI. But I want to talk a little bit about your past and kind of what brought you to where you are today and what you're working on. So we were previously talking, you worked on 5 companies, this being your 5th, one of which was a failure, you said openly. So can you talk to us about the successes you had? I think you had 2 prior successes before the failure, and then kind of what brought you to getting to where you are today.
So the funny story, I could easily turn this into a half-day seminar, which is not what you want. But the funny story here is that I actually never wanted to be an entrepreneur because my dad, my uncles, my cousins are all entrepreneurs in one way, shape, or form. And I've seen a picture of my dad getting home at 10, fall asleep in front of the telly. And I thought, I just want to get my CS degree, go work for IBM, get home at 4, which is what happens in Scandinavia, have my 6 weeks vacation, and the whole thing will be fantastic. And I did game development to kind of semi-fund my studies. And the sad thing was that the company which I worked for went bankrupt 3 weeks prior to me kind of finishing my studies. And the whole thing was just so perfectly planned. I would finish my studies, I would finish that project, I would get paid, I would have no debt, I would take my bicycle, I would go to IBM. I hadn't even talked to them, but in my head I would just bicycle out and say, hey, where's my desk? And I'm ready. So I had my counsel actually acquire the assets of that company, which sounds completely Gordon Gekko-like. That was not the case. But back then, 20 years ago, lawyers didn't really know much about software. So I bought all the software assets for $1,000 because they wanted to sell me chairs and monitors and computers and leases and what have you. So I bought 2 CDs. The company refinanced, came back to figure out that I bought really everything that mattered. And in 3 weeks, I made a small fortune. Not really through hard work, just good timing. And I thought, easy money. Then I'll blow it all quickly and then go work for IBM. So I invested all of it into a big data consulting company in the mid-90s. We actually analyzed raw log files. If any one of you have done clickstream analysis, kind of like pre-Google Analytics, for where you had to kind of use SQL to kind of parse log files. And doing that in the mid-90s was not poor timing. And ran that for 5 years. And speaking of good timing again, we sold it in April 2000, which was NASDAQ short of 5,000 and at the very top. I wish I could tell you I've seen the future, but I was just close to shore and I thought, hey, I'll go dry up a little bit. And then after that, I was actually not necessarily still fully convinced. So I took all of it again and placed it on red one more time, thinking, here we go. And then I just fucking lost it all. $10 million at 28, which I've made on a new venture. And I've actually been together with my wife for 22 years, and she was not happy. Wonderful apartment and pool table and everything gone. I had a really nice antique pool table that I bought, that it took me 2 months to have kind of, doesn't matter. But everything gone, and thought, okay, well, at least now I'm unemployable, so I better get cranking on the next one, and somehow persuaded her to move to Eastern Europe, now that we had less money. And spent 4 years there doing what you would call enterprise web analytics. Built up a really solid company, which we sold to Yahoo in 2008. And speaking of good timing again, we sold it in May 2008. What is that? 3-4 months really before the world took a turn for the worse. And then I think at that point, there was no going back. And then we started a predictive analytics venture for media, which we ran for 3 years and sold to Outbrain in 2013.
So I remember...
so that's the short story, yeah.
So with the interview, I saw a previous interview of yourself, and you're talking about Outbrain and the buyout for that specifically. And you were saying that the reason for which you selling the company was it couldn't scale anymore. So what was your mindset in terms of thinking like that? Is that not something you want to do in terms of working with a company that can only stay flat, or do you want to work for a company that has exponential growth?
So I certainly don't believe you can start any venture with some idea of you having some sort of exit in 3 years. I think you can start a company because you believe there's some sort of pain which you need to remove at all cost. Sometimes you can remove it faster than what you had kind of envisioned, but I don't think you can engineer an exit. You can make good product and happy customers, and out of that comes potentially some sort of exit. This, though, we were fortunate enough to kind of create a setting for where we quite rapidly kind of cornered the market for at least predictive analytics for editors. So we predicted which stories that CNN should carry, where on that homepage, for how long, and when they kill him, where else do they put those stories, and did that for about perhaps 80 of the top 100. So everything from the SF Chronicle to the Boston Globe to CNN, ABC, Fox, and the whole lot. And that's obviously nothing cooler than calling your mom and saying, hey, that story on CNN, I put it there. Which we really didn't, but I certainly made the recommendation and some editor took it and now the story is there. But it was one for where we maxed out that vertical. So now you've got to do one of two things. Either you just go horizontal and somewhat accept that this is what it is, or you find a new vertical to attack with the same technology, which is not as easy as it sounds, because that is just a whole set of unknowns. So we've created a setting for where we had both a Series B financing lined up and an M&A offer. And this is being filmed, right? Yeah. But at a very good multiple, we could not say no. So we took it. And I still owned about half the company at that moment. But it is certainly nice this time around to be in a setting for where, at least if we execute well, there's somewhat unlimited growth.
So along that lines, you were saying that there's about 10 billion schedulings that are happening per year, or can you
Yeah,
expand on that a
so
little bit?
two separate
Yeah.
studies actually came out a few years back that both concluded pretty much the same, which is that there's a little bit above 10 billion formal meetings being set up in the US alone every year. Not date nights or walk the dog or remember to do your taxes, just formal meetings. You and me meeting up in Manhattan first week of December for a cup of coffee, 10 billion. But it's not really that huge a number when you start to kind of divide it out. There's about 90 million knowledge workers, people who come into work, touch a computer in some way, shape, or form. There's 50 weeks. You can divide those numbers. There's 2 meetings per week per person, which might even be pessimistic. I certainly have more. Some of my most hardcore backend engineers might have less, but I think it might be a pessimistic number. So what I'm hunting really is that 90 million folks in the US and that 10 billion meetings, for where upon real success, if you look at your calendar, I made sure every single one of those events that I put them there.
So what was the inspiration in terms of wanting to create this? Did you have that pain in your life where you're like, I hate scheduling meetings, I got to create something better? Because I'm assuming this was born out of the sale to Outbrain, because you guys brought the team back together, and then from there you went to create this company. Am I correct in that?
Yeah.
Timeline in the way? Lineage?
That is the timeline. So I certainly don't, as an entrepreneur, believe in this idea of 3 good guys go into a room with some pizzas and some Diet Cokes and out comes a good idea, and then we start cranking on that tomorrow. That seems just unrealistic to me, that is even an option. You can certainly fall in love with something that you worked on all day on the whiteboard, but that doesn't make it a good idea. It just means that we were able to create a little bit of love on that whiteboard, and now we'll be spending years on it. What I like, though, is the opposite. So any half-decent entrepreneur, all of us in here really, will have good ideas every day. Not necessarily things we come up with. No, little moments where you're standing in line at Citibank, and I don't hope anybody in here works at Citibank, and you're thinking, fuck, I hate this. I hate you, I hate everything, I hate the store, I hate the whole setup. And then you take your phone, you write on your list, I should start a retail bank. And then tomorrow you will have another pain for where things didn't work out as you had hoped for. Then you write that onto your list. Because at least you can get them out of your head, onto a list, and forget about it so you can focus on your current venture. And I do that when working on individual ventures. And then 4 years later, upon some exit, I look at that list, and this time it was about 10 pages long, really of one-liners. Just really a list of hate, if you want. It's not a happy list. And some of them will be replicas. I've been in line at Citibank multiple times. And you start to kind of prune that list for just days where you are not a happy person. And say, sure, somebody else will solve that. Or perhaps it's not a real pain. That is just you who need a little bit more sunshine in your life. And then as you prune that list, some people would have solved it in those 4 years, right? It was a real pain. Some other guy came along and solved it. Good for him. And some of them are just not solvable. As in, it's very easy to imagine something. Sometimes it's very hard to kind of see how it should be solved. And sometimes even easy to conclude that it can't be solved. At least not now, November 2016. And that list becomes shorter and shorter. Then you end up with something which you can do research on. And this was one of those items. And I think the real catalyst, sorry for the long answer, was one for where post-exit, you have a little bit extra time on your hands. And I went back into my calendar and I counted all my meetings for the year prior. And I did 1,019 meetings. 1,019. I had 672 reschedules. 672. First of all, imagine all the pain I went through to set up the meetings to begin with, and then some random fucker goes back and say, hey, I can't do Thursday. No, we are doing Thursday. And when you look at that, at least there must be a moment where you say, you know what, that can't be a version of the future. There must be some other future here. And it's one of those things, right, for where if you really think about what we do here, it haven't changed much. I'm 20 years out of taking my CS degree, and if I look at 2 hours into my kind of working life, the first meeting I set up was, hey, can you do Thursday? No, how about Friday? Sure, 1, no, 1:30, yeah. Your office? Nah, Can we do that coffee shop? Okay. Are you going to send an invite? And I've had that discussion 20,000 times over those 2 decades. Somehow it seems almost sad to somehow imagine, oh, I'll just do another 20 years and then retire. Then you almost want to go home that day and say, okay, I give up. So I certainly think that that moment was one for where it could be now for where the one product that seems to work is this human assistant. For where if you win some sort of corporate lottery and you get a human assistant, people love that. But some people just won't ever get him. As in, Tom is never going to be your assistant, so you're on your own until you retire. So we thought we might have a pre-existing product market fit, a true pain, and an opportunity which was being mostly internal challenges. As in, can we make it work? And that's when I started to see if I could not bring the team back together.
So what was that process like? You obviously exited, you had your idea notebook that you pulled out, you flipped through your 10 pages, crossed off 8 of them, figured out which one you wanted to work on. How did you go about kind of enticing your fellow team members to come back on with you? Obviously, they're probably very happy because you had an exit. But beyond that, what was it that drew them to working on this idea and being a part of the next journey with yourself?
It's a good question, right? Because now it sounds sexy. 50 guys, and tons of machine learning, really kind of nitty-gritty data that we've been annotating now for years, for where we can build really exciting models on top of it. But if you go up to any engineer and say, hey, how about you and I work on meetings? He'll just throw up a little bit. No, I don't think so. As in, that's the worst. That's the last thing I want to work on. I don't want to do anything really in my life that rhymes with meeting. So no thank you. So it certainly takes a little bit of work for them to understand that this is a real pain. And obviously, if you're about to throw up, how about we then remove that gag reflex together? And it becomes certainly easier, as you suggest, when you work with people before, right? Because you're not just some random Yahoo. We've had a long past together, and perhaps there's just one more story that we can go do. And that was the beginning. Then worked out of Pret for 3 months just to kind of see if we could not create some backdrop to determine whether this was either possible or impossible. And it certainly suggested that it might be possible. But we raised the initial seed round, about $2 million, to only answer that question, to see if we could not collect that data set.
And you went out and were an assistant, right, for a couple months to kind of figure this out and see if this is something that you could do?
So we did the, speaking of pain, so one thing is to set up your own meetings, which is sad, because you'll do it at home at 11 p.m. in your underwear with a bowl of cereal, thinking, yeah, I guess I'll set something up for tomorrow. And as you do that, at least you have the reward of meeting exciting people on the other side. New employees, partners, customers, investors, and so on and so forth. So what Alex and I did, one of my co-founders, is that to just see whether a human could easily schedule another person's meetings without any context, because if I could not do that, there's certainly no chance in hell that we can build a machine that can do that. So what we initially did is that we just set up an email account which was shared, and I was his Amy, and vice versa. Talk about hate. One thing is to hate setting up meetings. Doing it for somebody else, that is not fun. And the cool thing about it was that I saw 2 things arrive from that test, which we did for about short of 2 months, playing each other's assistant, which was a great way to invalidate the idea. And that's all we tried to begin with, is to kill the idea. It's much easier to kill it early than to spend 4 years of your life on it.
Was this before you guys raised? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Okay.
All this was before we raised that initial seed round. And as you set up those meetings, 2 things arrived. One, the relief, like true, honest relief of being able to say, you know what, Tommy, I'd love to meet up. I'm a bit maxed out. End of next week, some afternoon at my office. Amy can help find some times. That relief of just being able to CC her in, even though I knew it was Alex on the other side, I don't care. Could be a machine, could be Alex. Could be a person called Amy, I don't care, just have the meeting set up. That was real. The second one was that as I started to kind of work Alex's meetings, even in that tiny data set, I could see things start to cluster. Not through some sort of magical data analysis, just as in I got tired of doing it. So I had a little notepad on my desktop with a few mini templates for where, okay, when I start a meeting, this is what I'm going to say. When I close it up, this is what I'm going to say. This is how I'm going to write the titles and do the invites. And I thought, if things start to cluster on a single person, then there will be easy clusters arriving if we do this on thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of people. So that was the beginning. And then the next step was just to validate that, do we perhaps know each other too well? So I hired a full-time assistant, asked 50 of my friends that I knew didn't have assistants, I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to do all your meetings to see if I could not replicate that. And that worked well. And on the back of that, I thought, this is worthwhile doing a proper test on. As in, collect real data and prove through that data set it can be solved. And that's what we raised the seed round on.
So with that real assistant and then collecting that information, data, how did you determine that the, I'm trying to think how to phrase this. You know what, never mind. I'm going to skip on that question because I'm trying to think off the cuff here for you. With the assistant and the person you hired, what did you learn from her managing 50 people? It seems like that's a large number for one person to handle. So I'm assuming you saw that, okay, one person can handle this, 50 so people. Let me try to expand on this. Or did you see, okay, this person can't handle it. We need to now create the solution that could do this.
So we've always had a strategy of either we make this human process a machine-driven one, or we die trying. So there's nothing for where I really cared about the optimization of whether she can manage 30 or 60. 50 just seemed like a reasonable amount, which was too much, but seemed like a reasonable amount. But I didn't really care whether she would drown or whether she would have spare time. It was a matter of whether could she replicate what Alex and I have just noticed when we did our mini test. Could I replicate that test? Which we could. And then that was enough for us to say, let's run a proper test, which we did for the subsequent 7-8 months before we raised our A round.
So with the tests, I'm curious to know, did you give her some of the templates you've written? Did you let her go on her own? How did you go about thinking about collecting that data to then raise your round? What was your thought process in there?
So we didn't use any of the data for the seed round, where she was Alex and I, then the assistant, and then we raised the seed round. And the seed round was raised on, we think we have something here, which is true and honest. We can't prove it, but what you buy for $2 million is thumbs up, this is tractable. A truly autonomous intelligent agent can be built to solve this human process. And if it can, that thumbs up, you'll be the first we'll ask to go invest in our A round. Or we come back and say, you know what? 2014 is just not the year where one can take a process that sounds simple and turn it into something fully autonomous. And if that is a thumbs down, we just walk away and say, now's not the time. We might revisit, come back later, but that's all you buy. Not MVP, not product, not revenue, not customers, not nothing. Thumbs up or thumbs down. And they were willing to kind of buy that for that initial seed round. And then come the end of the seed round, for where we gave them a thumbs up and we raised the A round, we brought data saying, hey, we've now done tens of thousands of meetings. This is what we see in the data set. First of all, that we believe that it is finite. That was probably the biggest risk we took. And probably if any one of you even just mull over the idea of either building some agent or even what it takes to build an agent, is that if you cannot define the universe in which your agent exists, it is just not tractable. As in, say you do intent prediction, such as, what is it Amy can do? So my universe is new meeting, cancel meeting, reschedule, running late, you're mandatory, you're optional, this is the PIN code for the phone number. All those things can happen in my meeting scheduling universe. But that's very easy to kind of imagine. What you don't know is that some sort of long tail for where there's no end to it. The end is really just you knowing the real world, which means that you're trying to build some sort of oracle, which is not today. That's either way, way later or never. So we needed to see that that curve would be, with a droopy tail and finite. And that we didn't know. So in that data set, we proved that anybody who emails within these tens of thousands of meetings, we can pick an intent and put that in, sometimes multiple intents. You're optional, and we're going to meet at my address. So, pick location and optional participant. But had we not been able to do that, then that would have been the end of the venture. Because if we now know the universe as in it consists of all these intents, then it's just big ass quotes here. Then it's really just a matter of collecting enough data, define the intents, create a model for each one of the intents, so that when I get a text, I can predict what is it that you're trying to tell me. So that was the backdrop for the A round.
Great. So with, you're just talking about how the artificial intelligence is focusing on one specific kind of subset of what you want them to do. Now, getting a little off topic, but still on topic in terms of artificial intelligence, you look at kind of, you have Google's Assistant, you have, yourself, you also have these third-party applications that are trying to do this. Why is it that you have to have a singular intent in terms of your AI to build something properly for the, the problem you're trying to solve? Why can't you do this big world kind of, thing where, you schedule a meeting, then you schedule the hotel, you schedule the trip, so on and so forth, kind of the larger vision of everything. Why can't you start there and build it that way? Why so small? And then grow?
So I think we can talk about the scope. And anybody who does anything in software will quickly realize that it's very easy to expand your scope, and it's probably much, much harder, at least for you and your team, to come up with something so concise that it actually becomes solvable within a reasonable time period. But I think this is going to play out with probably two types of AIs, if you will. Some sort of horizontal enabler AI, the Siris, the Cortanas, the Alexas, where they'll be very much in question-answer mode or request immediate action mode. Hey Alexa, what's the time in Singapore? Hey Siri, could you set my alarm for tomorrow morning, 6:20 a.m. please? Something for where there's an answer or an action which you can take on the request. That is really a very similar setting to that of a search query. And there's nothing bad with that. And I think that enabler AI will need the capability to figure out when you ask it to do a job where there is no answer. So there's actually no correct or false answer to you and me meeting up first week of December. There's certainly a positive outcome of you and I meeting up, but both Wednesday and Thursday that week are both true. So there's an objective which you describe to the agent for where I think, at least at this moment in time, with the science available to us, you need, if you want to hand over a job to an agent, to be able to define that universe in full. Because if you cannot, the agent will exist in some universe which you don't even know what it looks like. And how can you then make any predictions within that universe? So that, I'm very much a believer in, that these horizontal AIs will figure out there's a job I can't do. Do we have somebody on payroll that can do that job, say set up a meeting, submit my receipts, plan my travels, anything which you and I can imagine from verticalized AIs, and then hand over that job. And you can even see this happening right now, right? On Alexa, hey Alexa, play Eye of the Tiger from Spotify, please. Okay, that's kind of a clunky syntax. But
I use it to trigger my lights off, so I have to say, Alexa, trigger bedroom lights off. I have to say trigger before. Just like, turn off my lights. I'm in the room. You know what room I'm in. It's very clunky, I agree.
So I have the exact same thing for where I wake her up, and then I have to make the connection to the individual skill I want her to go take action on. But I think, however rudimentary it might be, and however syntax-driven it might be, I think it's a good version of, there will be some highly developed skills that somebody will specialize in. And then there'll be some enabler AIs that will be platform-like. Just like we have the App Store, for where even if Apple had infinite resources, which they don't, they wouldn't even know what apps do you go engineer for a Danish American dude like me in Manhattan with 2 teenage daughters. As in, you have no idea, right? Which is why your phone is different to mine. And it's going to be the same for where they wouldn't even know what agents I need in my life to run what I believe is a good life. So I think they will arrive.
Do you see yourself building a skill for Alexa? Like Alexa, ask Amy to schedule a meeting with John? Because it seems to align with what you're looking to do. Is that something that you could see yourself building in the future?
We've certainly tried to have a positive disconnect between intelligence and channel so that our agent could conceptually exist on Slack, some voice-enabled channel like Alexa, text, WeChat, wherever you might think that meetings will be set up in the future. It just happens to be that today the vast majority of meetings originate in your inbox. So that's the one kind of positive engineering disconnect that we've created. The other one is that we tried very hard to not create a system where we cannot retrain on a new language. Say we believe that for us to expand our market potential, we want her to speak Spanish so we can participate in those markets. So those are two kind of interesting engineering challenges that we've applied along the way.
So along those lines, in terms of learning language, what have you done to teach Amy the language that she now knows? I like how I'm referring to her as a person. So it's good though. Yeah.
Let me. So if you want to see something funny, go to X.AI/love notes, and you'll just see thousands of people who love the tool, which is wonderful, and that's fine. But if you really look at the text, you'll see two things. One, which I thought would take half a decade, people immediately go from saying software, app, application to he, her, she, him overnight, which I think is not just us. I think that will happen for almost all agents. That is interesting because that suggests that we'll create some sort of relationship with these agents. And the other one is that I have a board meeting on December 1st. We have a financial model for the year 2017 and the usual stuff you need to do if you run a company. And as I present that, me and Josh, my VP of Finance, will take all the credit. And at no point in that presentation to the board will we suggest this could not have been done had we not had access to Excel. There'll be no kind of extra credit to Excel spreadsheets in my presentation. It just is, right? What we see is that people give credit to Amy as in, no, I didn't set up the meeting. She did a good job. No, this is not me. I'm just the monkey who turns up. Those two I'm very excited about, that you create the relationship and you hand over the credit to the agent itself. So that's interesting. Coming back to your question on the data itself, the funny thing here is that however kind of sexy it sounds sometimes, what we're working on here, just like if you want to build a tunnel from Manhattan to New Jersey, everybody will talk about the tunnel itself. It's going to be so much faster to get to New Jersey. The whole thing is going to be just beautiful. But the tunnel isn't the work. All the engineering will be on the drill itself, but nobody will be talking about the drill. You need to figure out what drill do we need to engineer, at least on each side, and once come in the middle, you're probably going to disassemble that drill and not use it again, but that was the work, the drill. Just like a vast amount of the resources that we've applied, time and money, have been on building a custom data annotation console and annotating data day in, day out for almost 3 years. Like, you have no idea.
Now with that data, going along the lines, were there human intervention involved in that? How did you, like, I know there had to have been in the early days humans kind of parsing through that information. It may have been mostly machine.
Less on, and now I might just be overly anal here, less on parsing, as in the human can now understand it and will take some appropriate action. If the human takes some appropriate action, I am not any the richer. I just see some outcome of a request, but that doesn't get me any further towards my goal, which is I want to build a fully autonomous agent. I just made one guy happy, but sure, great, but I need to figure out how do I make 100 million people happy, not one guy. So in that regard, we tried very hard not to create a setting where we can cheat. So all output is machine driven. any parsing can only come through the machine. It might be shitty parsing, we might need to debug and do all sort of things, and the human can only annotate. That means you write, let's meet up Monday next week, say 2 o'clock, and if that doesn't work, we can do 3 o'clock. There's a set of kind of temporal data points, certainly, that we need to mark up. Next week, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and not only once you mark those up, how do you even mark them? As in, just think about, so we have 3 primary entities which we need to both be able to kind of detect and extract and anchor and co-reference and all of that stuff. But how do you even label it? Like you have 3 highlighters and a piece of paper. Do you just highlight it? Probably not. How do I make sure that the 3 o'clock is tied in to the first Monday you said? Because somehow humans can very easily figure out if you say, let's meet Monday at 2, and if that doesn't work, we can do 3. You know that 3 belongs to Monday. How do I know? And those annotation guidelines, I give you, this I'm not proud of, it's just the semi-sad state of affairs. I think our annotation guidelines are about 90 pages long. I think for time alone, 25, 30 pages. That means you couldn't label 4 lines in my annotation console and do it correctly. As in, that would be piss poor data, and I would have to discard it. So you would have to somehow have 25 pages of understanding before you can label it. And that's have been massively expensive. As in, millions and millions of dollars have been invested into creating the data set. But that, I think, is not just out of me wanting to go through some sort of morbid type of pain, but that is our competitive advantage, that we sit now with a set of truths for where this we know is true. Let's see if we can create models that can replicate that. Sorry, this is I'm interviewing myself. This is half therapy of something I spent 3 years on.
It's all right. That's what I'm here for. It's a therapy table.
Yes.
I want to actually see if there's anything in here that is worth jumping into that I wrote. So I actually like this kind of fun fact. Can you tell us about how the name Amy came about?
So we have 2 agents. One called Amy Ingram, the other one called Andrew Ingram. And it doesn't take you guys more than 5 seconds to figure out what their initials are. And that's haha. And we geeks. And if you've done any type of kind of text analysis, you would have worked with something called Ngrams, which is part of her last name. So it's just a semi Easter egg of sorts. And then I also had a human assistant called Amy at one point that helped us out on stuff. And someday I should probably tell her that you have 700,000 friends.
You're telling her through the video, I think. Hopefully she'll watch it. Yeah. Now, with the, you were talking about the concept of creating Amy as the Slack or the Dropbox for kind of your personal assistant. Can you talk a little bit about really what you're saying there? Because I'm obviously mixing up your words. But what was your overall goal in terms of using that terminology in a few of your interviews that you've had and discussed that? What are you aiming to do? Is that kind of going with the travel side of everything that we were briefly mentioning?
Certainly when I bring Dropbox into the picture for where we have nothing in common with them outside of the business model.
The pricing structure?
Yes.
So free and then pay as well. Which you just released, by the way. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. That means the race is on. The board want to see some money and all that good stuff that comes with having a price product in the market. But yes, a free edition for where you can schedule up to 5 meetings a month. Hopefully you fall in love. Sign up for the professional edition, do unlimited meetings, tune a signature, add VIPs. Hopefully you show it to a colleague. Then you sign up for the business edition, move her to your domain, and we have all 72 people in that company. So that's a very similar business model to that of Dropbox.
Okay.
So that's been the comparison.
Gotcha. I was trying to figure that out.
Yep.
And how that works. Same kind of model as well as Slack, which is free, and then you pay to search actually.
Yep.
On Slack.
So I think Slack is obviously wonderful. Anything which I could do to kind of replicate what they've done to get to 100 million in ARR, I'll do it. Whatever it takes. I'm not sure what it is, but I'll fucking do it. But the thing I like about Dropbox is that there's so many similarities which I can choose to not repeat mistakes that are obvious mistakes and choose to pick
Where
up.
are some of those mistakes? What could you kind of expel on?
I could have chosen 5 tiers, 2 tiers, 1 tier. I could have chosen different pricing structures. I could have chosen a different way to kind of limit how do you go from free to paid. And certainly what Dropbox have shown in their example is that you should not handicap the core utility. So if I store a file on Dropbox, whether free or paid, you need to make sure that the sync and the file and everything that comes along with it is as good on the free as on the most expensive enterprise tier which you have. That core utility needs to stay intact. I might have less storage, fair enough, but the core utility is the same. That's a really good learning. The ceiling that they picked was on their core utility, storage, not on you can't have file names longer than 13 characters or some sort of other retarded idea. But something where that's our core utility. So if you like the core utility, you should want more of it. And if you don't like it, then our offering isn't strong. And that again is a good learning for where if we do good meetings, if you and I meet up next time using Amy and we did well, you should want to set up more meetings using Amy. So that should be kind of the gating factor. So I think there's just many learnings for where we don't have to stumble around in the dark, for where it's been tried and tested.
So I know one of the visions you're hoping for one day is Amy and Andy kind of collaborating to schedule meetings. So it's just kind of scheduling nirvana, I think is what you've called it at one point. So how do you see us as humans transitioning into this scheduling nirvana? I mean, obviously using your product, but what are kind of the steps to take for us to get to that?
So it seems almost silly. Say you and I want to meet up. We have some data science position which you're applying for, and you and I want to take a walk around Manhattan. And in that setting, if you wrote me a written letter, "Dear Dennis, in a fortnight I will arrive in Manhattan for our..." I was thinking, who is that dude? What is going on here? That seems overly eccentric. It's going to send me that. If we do well, setting up a meeting by doing email ping pong in X number of years from now should seem equally silly and eccentric, as in, how do you have time to do this at 11 p.m.? What else is going on in your life where this is what you're dedicating your time to? I'll be surprised, disappointed, choose not really to engage. Just like, I can't write you a letter back, as in, what do I write it on? Do I have any stamps? Where do I even go to kind of put it afterwards? I'm not even sure, right? So we've moved on to email, and that just seems so obvious. If I really do well, the whole paradigm for how we set up meetings change. And I don't think, that sounds like kind of West Coast crazy talk, and that's fine. But if you think about it, it seems certainly somewhat sane to suggest that in 20 years from now, or pick some date far out into the future, we're not going to do email ping pong. We can discuss how far out that might be and whether I win. It could be way out and I lose, that's cool. But I think we can agree that doing email ping pong cannot be one version of the future. That will not be it. I do think though that what we do, given the massive advantage of the single agent market, suggests that we or somebody like us could win and run it in full. So scheduling nirvana is this setting here, right, for where you email me, I CC in Amy and say, hey, she can help put something on my calendar once you're in the city. You reply back and say, oh, great, I have CC'd Andrew, he can hash it out with Amy. But if Andrew is Amy, so who's she talking to? So she's talking to herself. That setting is super optimal. It's almost like self-driving cars, right? Self-driving cars are hard because the next, I don't know, decade and a half, 2 decades, we're going to have mixed mode. Humans and machines driving together. And that's the hard thing because machines will make predictions on that other car. Are you going to stop? I can see all the variables. You're deaccelerating. I can see the signs. I'm going to make a prediction. It is still a prediction though. You will be wrong on some of those predictions and things will go wrong. Once they're all machine driven, they're not predictions. I'll just ask the bloody car, are you stopping? Yes, good. Straight ahead. We are the same where we are having the hardest time in the beginning because we're making predictions on what humans might do in the future, I can just ask the machine. It's even better if I am the machine, because I can ask myself, and that is a very optimal network. And you can start to do things that even if we all had a human assistant, we couldn't even do, right? So say, it's probably even more dramatic here in the city, but certainly I'm downtown, I have 3 meetings in Midtown, it's half an hour each way. Next week, there's 3 hours of commute time on the subway. What if I did all those meetings on Wednesday, 1, 3, and 5? Same meetings, same people, 2 hours less. As in, 2 hours less. Why don't I just do that? Or why don't I ask Amy to do that? Because she's at the mercy of the guests. And they have their priorities. But if I manage their priorities, then you can actually create massive harmony in this network where you can align things which is just not possible, even with competing machine agents, by the way. So I'm sorry, I'm going all in here.
No, it's good.
I'm raising capital. It's like, sorry.
Well, that's why I asked you that question.
question.
No, you're answering it. That's why I wanted to ask you, because I know it's something very passionate of yours, and that
Yeah.
goal.
No, I'm just, I can see it happen. I'm just so eager to run towards it.